Okay, I'm starting on the coastline of Croatia. And these first three, Split, Dubrovnik, are the main parts of what I'm going to talk about today in the Dalmatian coast. And then next week, talk about Zagreb and the Plitvice Lakes, both of which are inland a little bit. So this is a map of Croatia. Zagreb, you see, is farther in, but we're going to be talking about these two towns, Dubrovnik almost at the southern end of Croatia and Split about halfway up. The place where we went hiking was just right in here. Well, there, I've got it on there. So I have some other, just a couple little pictures of some of the other towns along there. And notice too how many islands there are. Croatia has over 1,500 islands. Most of them have inhabitants, but not all of them. Some of the real small ones don't. But they too are just wonderful places to go. And so there's so much to see there, you just hardly know where to start. And if you go once, you want to go back. So our second week will be this right here. We did a little side trip up to a castle. And the Plitvice Lakes are one of the three UNESCO World Heritage Sites. This one, Split, and Dubrovnik are all UNESCO sites, really unique and to be savored. Oh, we're going to run into a problem with this right here, I think. If you can get rid of your stuff on the right side, okay. I want some space. Croatia has a really long history, and I want to spend like 30 seconds. So it goes way, way back to the Neanderthals even, and the Greeks and Romans. We're going to see the Roman Empire, where the Roman Emperor Diocletian built his palace in 305. That goes way back, and it's still standing. So if you remember your history, the different tribes moved in after the fall of Rome. Different tribes, even as far as ways Poland came down and settled in this place. Hungary, everybody who wanted a piece of land came. As you look down this, you'll see that the Sabor is a parliament and a Ban is a viceroy. We're going to see the Ban in Zagreb. The Venetians covered a lot of the Dalmatian coast, about 400 years, and we'll see something that looks very Venetian. The Habsburgs, of course, World War I, had the German invasion. They killed off a lot of minorities, big problem with that. Then the Kingdom of Yugoslavia was formed after the First World War, and we hear about Tito, who was a communist leader, but broke from Russia. There were 7 countries in the Yugoslavia, which were 7 countries, what did they say, six languages, 5 religions, something like that. But they did nationalize and really got back into the early industrialization. And of course, right now, they started developing tourism even then, but right now, Croatia stops, particularly Dubrovnik and Split, which I'm going to show you today, are big on the tours in the Mediterranean. So where Croatia was mostly agriculture, it got transformed into industrialized state. And after the breakup of Yugoslavia, there was a war. Tito Milosevic came to power. He was Serbian and wanted to reunite these 7 countries back under Serbian rule and bombed some of these UNESCO sites, which just broke my heart at the time. This was in the early 90s. But they did eventually mostly find their own way, and Croatia declared its own independence. The only ones in Serbia now are Montenegro and Bosnia. So the rest of them are all independent. And Croatia joined the EU in 2013. The current prime minister is Andrej Plenković. You can see that on the bottom. So that's your history lesson. This is what former, I know you don't want to hear all the rest of it with you next week. The former Yugoslavia after World War, you see how many years we're covering here. So Croatia is this very odd-shaped, kind of like a sickle-looking country. The Italians had this in there too. I didn't even mention them. Slovenia is a beautiful country. We could do that another day. Serbia did get Montenegro and Kosovo. This was an autonomous province that's part of them. The former Yugoslavia Republic of Macedonia has this weird name because there's also Macedonia in Greece, so it's not to be confused with Greece. I also visited Kotor and Slovenia and Bosnia on this other trip. So, those remain to be seen in another show. So we'll start with Split. And Split, of course, is a waterfront town. And early on was settled. I'll try to stay away from all these weird shapes here. Split is right in the center of this coastline, or pretty much, and it's a great hub for the ferry lines. You can take ferries to a lot of these islands. You see some of the bigger ones on the map. Brach is this great big one right here. We were kind of across from that. We did a hike over there one day on the hiking trip. But you can go to all the islands pretty easily. So Split is interesting. As I say, it's a UNESCO site because it was the place where Diocletian emperor retired. Now, a lot of these emperors, of course, got murdered off or died off in some way in battle or whatever, but he actually retired and died in his bed. Now, how he died, we're not quite sure. But anyway, originally, these buildings were not here. The palace came right up to the water, which you'll see in another picture. And you see the walls around it. They are still standing. This octagonal building was his mausoleum, which he had built to be buried in, which he was buried in. This was built later. We'll talk about that. And this little courtyard here we're going to see, and that's prominent also. And we'll see a little bit more in some of these other pictures how it looked. So this was the outline of the main, what became the old city after Diocletian died. And this part was added onto it later. So this basically, these two squares are the old town, all pedestrian, if you go to Split today. All this along here was not in the original Split, but it is today, of course. It has the harbor. So this is what it would have looked like back in Diocletian's day. You see, it came right up to the door. There's one little boat ramp and an underground, the basement entrance, so to speak. But there are other entrances over here, here, and here, one on each side, like a typical Roman city, divided in quarters. These two places back here were actually barracks for his soldiers. So he did have soldiers who were staying there. You see the octagonal place where he wanted to be buried. So this was the original, what it looked like original. Here's a later drawing of it. And you see that pretty early on, after he died, they built this out farther, built some houses along it, had docks where the boats could pull up. And portions of this wall, which would have been Diocletian's apartments in his palace, still remain. They're not all there, but a good chunk of it is, and you'll be able to see them in other pictures. So as we go along, we're looking across the harbor, and you see that tower, which was built later. So this is part of the old town right in through here. And here are some of that original Roman wall with those shops and things along the outside of it. Along the same, from a different angle. So this entrance on the side is one of the places where you come in today. You usually don't come through that basement, but you can. And of course, there's Roman columns just everywhere and debris. Lots of arches with the Corinthian columns. If you remember your history about architecture, we have the Doric and Ionic and Corinthian columns. And we have columns all over. Another view of those same ones. We're going to look at now the cathedral, which became the cathedral, this place where he was buried. You see his burial place here, a little cutaway of the octagonal building, his mausoleum, became the Christian cathedral after the rise of Christianity in Croatia. And right around the corner from that, which would be around this corner, is this open space that I was showing you on the first map. And it's an open area which now has concerts and things in it, and it's still open and it's still there. So this is a view of that octagonal mausoleum from the outside, still there, and outside the door. One of the many things that they stole from the Egyptians, their obelisks and lions and things sort of scattered all through here, and quite a few of them are still around. And Diocletian on one of the combs. This is the tower that was built later, the bell tower. So it's now a Catholic cathedral, very, very small. In fact, my travel buddy and I went to a little concert in there, and guess where the choir was from? Waco, Texas. So that's nice. So this little courtyard is called the peristyle. It's the central courtyard, and the something I can't pronounce, Prorythrium, I think. But there are the Roman arches all through it and all through the old town, as you see. They carried that over. So what became this palace then became the old town. So if you were looking at the Perithum, I can't pronounce it. Let's see if I can go back and find it. Want to go back? All right, this right here, this entrance goes down under under this floor right here. That's the one that led out to that entrance to the sea, that first entrance. And it's made of the marble, which most of this is. And most of this marble came from the island of Brach. And this has been here almost 2,000 years. Begun in 295, and he retired there in 305, though it wasn't completed at that time. But he was depressed and ill, and he did die in 312. So he didn't get to live there very long, but this would be a bust of Diocletian. And if you go down in there, and you can take the tours of the basement. It's very gloomy looking, kind of a greenish tint to a lot of it. You've got a little gift shop in there, but marble floors, and it was used for storage, and they had running water, and you see the water pipes. They had some of the water there and flushing toilets and storage for all these ships that were coming in. He lived very well, I think. Within the old city is the Temple of Jupiter. Remember, they had still the old Roman gods back then, and that is still standing as well. Inside there's this ceiling, so it hasn't fallen in or anything. The temple statue of Jupiter, which is not a very great statue in my opinion, but he's still there. Just a very plain interior. There is a nice Roman museum in town. This is the entrance to it, and with a lot of the Roman artifacts that were there. Just some of the things that are in the museum. Sarcophagus. This looks like Egyptian. So after Diocletian's death, they remained in use by his family, and some other emperors moved into it for a while. But there were invasions by other people and eventually refugees from other places. The refugee situation is not new. They found shelter inside the palace's walls, and they kind of just moved in. People just moved in and made it into their little town. You know, nobody's living here. We might as well just take it over, and they did. So the streets are very narrow, buildings old, and you'll see chunks of Roman. You see some little pillars along here, and you see pieces of Roman architecture just everywhere you look. Stone, well, I'm getting all this extra stuff, stone streets. And the new part of the old town would be this part, the Piazza. And again, you see from the Venice times, some of the arched windows, and along here, there are arched windows. Here's my buddy, Teresa, and some more of the Roman stuff that's still there. So it's a combination of newer buildings, none of them very new. I'd say, you know, several hundred years old, but not thousands of years old. But if you keep walking down between those two old city and the newer old city, you can go straight down to the Adriatic Sea. So we're back down here now at the waterfront, which now has, instead of backing right up to the palace, it's full of little shops and restaurants and things like that. Around the corner, farther walking, you see some of the Venice influence, again with these rounded windows, and along here. So the Venetians were there 400 years. They did leave their mark. If you get farther away from the old town, it looks more like the ordinary Italian, Greek, Mediterranean, you know, this is Mediterranean climate. You see olive trees and lemon trees and that kind of thing. In the newer part of the old town is a fish market, which is no longer just fish, but has all sorts of stuff. And the other old market is on the other side of the palace. So there's a market there. I love the way this lady's looking at me thinking, what are you doing, you tourist? Just again at the front edge facing the sea, and some vendor with his balloons, another one of them. So it's very picturesque. You can wander around these little streets just indefinitely. But we're not going to do that. We're going to move on to Dubrovnik. I told you this is not going to be the whole thing today, just the coast. Dubrovnik's very interesting too. This is from up on a hill. You can stop and take a picture. Not very clear, I'm afraid, on this cloudy day. This is the old harbor, which we'll see better in some other pictures. And an old map. So early on, this city was divided by a river. And this is a hill that's going up along from here, goes up this way and kind of up this way. This map is turned around from the way you usually see Dubrovnik. Usually you see this little harbor on the other side, over on this side. But eventually they filled in this river and made it just part of the town. And the gate right here, this kind of rounded gate, is the Pile gate, which we'll see in a picture. And already you see the walls all the way around it. So it is a walled city. Did have a big earthquake in 1667, but they were able to rebuild quite a bit of it then. If you want to come as a visitor, of course, this is all town now outside the walls, and back over in here are plenty of hotels and things that can take you into town. So the earliest settlement there was called Ragusa. And it was, again, held by various people who came in and out. And at times it was a free state and was a big port with a big trading center. And they were able to establish other towns in India and all through that whole eastern area. A much better view here from the aerial, obviously one I didn't take. Here's where this river would have been. And the main street, the Stradun, and that Pile gate, which we're going to see in a minute. Here you get a really good view of the walls that were built very early on. They found evidence that these walls go back at least to the 8th century, 7th or 8th century. Excuse me, I'm going to get a drink of water. This little harbor has all kinds of little boats in it. These are restaurants along here. Over here is the cathedral. This main street is all marble, which we'll see. It's a very lovely town. During the Serbian War, which I'm going to talk about more later, the Serbs were about where I'm taking this picture from, and lobbed shells onto this UNESCO heritage town in 1990, which was a real shame. So this is our entrance to Dubrovnik as visitors now from the Pile gate. And walking down the Stradun, all marble. And at the end, we see a bell tower and this Sforza Palace on this side. But immediately as we come in the gate, we're going to see something close up, and that's the Franciscan monastery. I sure wish I could get rid of some of this stuff on the bottom. You're not seeing any of my pictures.
They're showing up perfectly, Mary.
Well, it isn't on mine. Anyway, you can see the writing on the bottom. I'm going to have to remember that on the other. Maybe I'll move it to the top in the next one. So inside, there's a very lovely cloister of this Franciscan monastery. It had a library and pharmacy and other things. And are you seeing this? Please move this window.
Yes, I am.
I don't know how to get rid of that. Do you?
No.
Put this window away from. Well, that's going to go away. Okay.
Okay.
So I don't know where I got there and why it went away. Oh, it's back. It's back. I don't know what it's doing. From the shared application. I'm not sharing any application. I don't know what that's about. So anyway, at the end of the street is this bell tower, the clock tower. I'm sorry, not a bell tower, clock tower, and the Sforza Palace. And alongside of it, this is that clock tower right here. And along this side is another palace. So of course I had to go walk along the wall. I walked just about all the way around it, I think. And you get some really good views of the city down below. And speaking about the shelling of the Serbs from the hill over there, you see how hilly it is here going up this way and then this way. You see the new roofs right here. Typically in these houses, the kitchen was on the top floor. So as they shelled, these houses caught on fire very easily, the ones that had anything cooking. And you see some of the old ones that were not replaced, but about 70% of the roofs were replaced in Dubrovnik after that shelling in 1990. So you see a few still with the old roofs, but quite a few with new ones. And here you see some of the bombed out places that had not been rebuilt when I was there. They probably are by now. Another place where I came to where it was bombed out. The general who ordered the bombing of this UNESCO heritage site was sentenced to 7.5 years in prison afterwards, rightly so, I think. When we took our guided tour of it, the guide showed us a place of the major bombing and places that had direct hits. All of these dots that you see had bombings. They lost a total of 114 civilians bombed in this. This was not soldiers they were fighting against. Here's some wonderful views from the walls. The cathedral is the one with this rounded dome. You can spot that anywhere. There are several churches, but that's the one with the rounded dome. The girl that I was rooming with said, "Oh, I discovered a little restaurant." I don't think she discovered it. It's been there a few hundred years. But she did find how to get down to it from this wall, just hanging on the side of the cliff. Some of them have a real sheer drop off on the outside. So Dubrovnik was really ahead of its time because it was held by several different countries, as you saw. But once it was a republic, it really became an early adopter of lots of things that we might consider modern today, but were not modern back in those days. They did have a water supply with an aqueduct and public fountains. And as you see, various other pretty fancy things back in the 1400s. This was a ship that was in the harbor when I happened to be there. And of course, this was a port that was used being on the southern part, particularly the southern part, very close to Greece, Albania. And there were lots of ships that came in and out of there with trading. They call those ships the Argosy, and I've heard that name somewhere. I think in Jacques Cousteau's ship was named the Argosy that traded through the Mediterranean. This is a view of the old port there. And another one. Different languages were spoken in Croatia, and particularly in Dubrovnik. First of all, Latin, because it was a Greek and then a Roman colony for many, many years. Then eventually Italian, and they did speak Dalmatian, which was partly Croatian and partly Roman. So they did have several languages. This is in facing the port. You see the mirror, the houses across the bay. And at sunset, there's a nice view from the sunset. So exploring in the old town is interesting because, like Split, it has very narrow streets, stone walls. This is my view of the cathedral through a little peek hole. And the dome that you will see every place. There are lots of little restaurants like this one, and hanging out in little streets, and you just see little restaurants everywhere. You see how steep some of the streets are. This one coming back toward the mainland on this side. So it's good walking. It's all pedestrian because you can't really get a car in there. I guess they do have some way to get supplies into restaurants, but it would be difficult to drive anywhere there. This is another church. This one is the Jesuit church, which I'm going to show you next. You're a little closer. And the steps going up to the Jesuit church. So there are several other churches in town. And right outside, and you can see it from all the walls, is this island right offshore called Lokrum, L-O-K-R-U-M. And it's still wooded like that. It was a monastery, had a monastery on it, which is now in ruins, but you can't go out. It has walking trails. It's meant to be kept as a place to just be quiet and peaceful and take your picnic lunch and go hiking. So it's not intended to be built on. So of course I did have a little time to go out there to see it. I was fascinated with that. And there's still some animals and little wildlife out there. But the monastery, as I said, is in ruins. And you come through a door and you wonder, who are these people that lived out here in seclusion? So we're looking up now past the walls onto the hillside, and you can see how steep this is. Looking at another view from the other side. And once you get past the old city itself, you do have all these wonderful hotels and other things to see in the area, beaches and so forth. While I was there, I enjoyed a Croatian dance show. Typically, the Croatian dances are very simple compared to some of the Balkan dances. I'm a folk dancer from way back. Then the red, white, and black is pretty much the color of the costumes. You do see some others from different provinces, but this is the most typical. I'd say 80–90% of the costumes would be these colors. And they'll vary in different, from different islands particularly, and from different places. They'll have their own specific costume. And I'm catching myself saying costume, and they're not costumes, they're national dress. Some that are a little variety in the colors. It's real hard to catch people when they're dancing. They're not very clear. So those are a few that were mostly clear. So I'm going to end this with the sunset and from Dubrovnik, and go on just a couple more slides on the Dalmatian coast. This picture in the background was taken from an airplane. As you fly along the coast, you just see the many, many islands split. You see the little, I don't know, what do you call them, the little palace here. And Makarska was along that way. This highway opened in 1965, connecting Dubrovnik with Zagreb and the northern cities. But up until then, you can see how difficult it would have been to get anywhere without a highway along there. But as traveling even in a bus along there and seeing all these islands out there, they're just wonderful views everywhere. And going hiking up in these mountains just was really wonderful. This is the island of Kabčat, which is south of Dubrovnik on the way to Kotor Bay. This is Makarska, which is, this is where we were hiking back up in these mountains. We did hike into Makarska one day from Baška. This is the harbor in Baška Voda where we stayed. This is from just in the little town's harbor, about a block from our hotel. Very small town. This little town is Trogir. Again, all these have long histories, Romans, castles. They're interesting to see. Just a couple pictures from them. Zadar is another one. This is an old Romanesque church. St. Donats. And some Roman ruins. This was all Roman ruin along here. And this is me about 10–15 years ago. When was this? 2006, I think. And some Roman ruins. St. Mary's Church. This is interesting in Zadar. This is called an ocean organ. These holes in here let the ocean come up under here. And as they do, it whistles. And they make different sounds. So you come by and it's going woo, 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 woo. It's really fun to listen to. Some of the ships that have come in, they're all different sizes and shapes, including now the big cruise ships, but lots of yachts of all sizes, and the ferries and so forth. This was a shepherd on our way to Zagreb on the bus. We watched him out in his pasture with his sheep. Just a quick look in Rijeka. Look at the facade of this church. Isn't that gorgeous? And the square. These were just short stops. Opatija. We're getting now to the northern part of the coastal. Croatia is very well known for Europeans as a place to go in the summertime. There are lots of beaches, lots of places to stay, lots of hotels. They really cater to the tourist trade. The hiking trip that I did was in the first week in May. And so these beaches were empty, but the weather was just perfect. It wasn't too hot or too cold. But this is a favorite country for Europeans to travel. And this is my last shot of Baška Voda Harbor at night with the sun going down.
Interesting, Mary. Thank you.
And that's all she wrote.
Okay, well, let's see if anybody has questions. Back on the Argosy, Jack said Argosy was Jason's ship in Jason and the Argonauts.
True, too. I thought there was another one too, though. Am I mistaken about that? I don't remember it very well.
I don't know, but Mary, I did have a boating question there. When you were there in May, it was probably before the winds pick up in the summer. We were in Greece, and in late May through August, they have a very strong wind that comes in that they call the Maltemi. And you'd have daily, like 45.
I don't remember being windy.
Because it's like the perfect place to go sailing. I mean, just a beautiful place.
There are sailing boats. There are boats everywhere, because of all the islands you can put in a lot of the islands. There are all kinds of places you can stay. It's just a wonderful place to go, either solo, like in a boat, or on a tour, or go hike, or whatever. There is public transportation, though, of course, you wouldn't be able to get out and see anything that way.
Well, this is a naive question. What language do they speak?
They speak Serbo-Croatian, which is a little bit different from Serbia and Croatia, a little bit different dialect, kind of like the Poles and the Czechs. They can speak to each other and understand each other. It's not exactly the same, but very close.
Do they have many English-speaking people?
Yes, that was another nice thing that they're teaching, and this was 2006, my first trip, in 2009, the second one. They were at that time teaching the kids in school from first grade. They were teaching English as a second language,
Okay.
all their kids.
Okay.
Everybody under 20 could speak English. Some
Okay.
couldn't, but the people that we were with all did. And, with all the hotel people, every shopkeeper, we had no problem with English at all. The money is called a kuna, K-U-N-A. I couldn't tell you the value of it anymore, but they do have their own money. Of course, have their own country. Somebody else, a hand up? Genevieve? All right.
If you had 30 days to live in Croatia, where would you stay?
That's really hard to say because if you come back next week, I'm going to do Zagreb. Zagreb is the capital, and there's so much to see and do in Zagreb. Plus, I have friends there that I met on these trips, the first trip actually, and saw again on the second trip, and have seen in the US since then. So I'd probably say Zagreb, or a city of city near Zagreb. But any of the coastal places, they all go to the coast in the summer too. That's just something they all do. It's like Canadians going to Florida, they all do it, right? That's kind of what they do. They all go to the coast. They all have their favorite island or their boat or whatever.
So what are their winters like?
They have winter. I know they have winter. Because they'll say it's too chilly to swim in the ocean now, but once summer comes, they get hordes of people on their beaches. We saw virtually nobody on the beach. Once in a while, some brave soul would be out. That was very rare. The beaches were not open the beginning of May, but the weather was about 75 and wildflowers everywhere, sunny every day. They told us it rained every day the week before we were there. So that was just really, really fortunate because we had such a wonderful time being outdoors that whole time.
So actually, Stan and Sandra had asked what month was the best to travel with good weather and no tourists, and you just said May was like that.
Yeah, and I would say probably September, October. October, it already starts getting cold. Even in Greece, my daughter went to Greece in October, and she said even then it was getting cold in Greece. So that's kind of surprised me.
Okay, and did you feel like it was safe, like to get around on your own or?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. When we did our hiking trip, as I say, we were just about a block from the center of town. The whole town was, 2,500 people maybe. And we were right on the ocean. We were in a 5-star hotel. We had absolutely wonderful food. But we could walk into town and visit the little shops and the harbor and everything. And we'd go after dinner and pick up something in some of the shops to take with us for lunch during the day. Because when we were up in the mountains, there were 1, no bathrooms, 2, no 7-Elevens, no patisseries or anything. I mean, you brought your lunch with you, and we were out all day, like from 8 or 9 in the morning till 4:30 in the afternoon. So
Okay.
we could walk anywhere. It was no problem at all.
So what did you do about restrooms?
Well,
Like the
I was in a lot better shape than I am now. I couldn't do it today, but yeah, we stopped for behind a bush stops. People took something with them.
Okay, here's a question from Gail Turner. Did you get to be in private homes at all, eat traditional food, anything like that?
But not on the hiking trip. The first trip I did was a 1-week tour, including Croatia and Slovenia, and it ended in Zagreb. And then I had a 1-week homestay with Friendship Force in Zagreb, and that'll be next week. So,
Okay.
so the second trip, as I say, but I did precede that first one with a couple extra days in Dubrovnik, where I went down to Karo Bay. And on the hiking trip, we had 1 free day where we went over to Mostar in Bosnia. So I do have those other 3 countries that I saw on one of those 2 trips.
What did you think about their food? What was like traditional food?
Food was very good. Of course, I'm vegetarian, so I didn't get to have the fish, but they serve a lot of fish, you can imagine. All these port towns, you'll see the sailors with their nets out on the docks, fishing boats, lots and lots of fishing boats. They have a lot of fish. But the food, all the food that I had in Croatia was great. I had, wonderful food, everything.
Okay, Sandra, do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask the question? That's an interesting question about the vestiges of communism. Well,
Okay, I was just curious, having been in other East European countries, if you found vestiges of communism, like very dour, unsmiling people.
I did not find that. What I did find is a lot of animosity between Serbs and Croatians. Because, and I was going to cover a little bit more of that next week, but I can now too. You remember seeing the shepherd as we left Zadar, as we did that road from up to Zagreb, which was maybe 100 miles. And all along that road, there were bombed out houses. Now, this is 2006. And this is from a war that ran between 1990 and 96, 95.
Wow.
Those bombed out houses were farmhouses all along that road. And next to it would be a new house. And I asked them why they didn't tear those down or rebuild them or something like that. And the bus driver said, "We want to remember what they did to us." This was the Serbians bombing in Croatia. So there were, after the war, if you lived in Serbia, you might have had those neighbors all your life, and your parents and your grandparents might have lived there forever. There were a lot of mixture between those countries, particularly from the First World War on, which was 2018, it was Yugoslavia. And those people moved between those countries freely and lived everywhere, and they were scattered everywhere and intermarried. And when that war started, and people declared independence, or these various countries declared independence. If you weren't from that country, if you were a Serbian living in Croatia, you were not welcome anymore. There was a huge, massive migration of people on both sides, back and forth. And the same way in Serbia, you know, if you were any other Bosnian, Kosovo, I mean, you heard about some of the stuff that went on in Kosovo. Yeah, there was a lot of problems with ethnic, I don't know, sanctity of your own, and everybody else was off limits. Other than that, people were
Was there not also ethnic cleansing?
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. Yes. You know, as I said, 330,000 people were killed by the Germans and various other people after and right at the end of World War II. And, you know, this is really what I found rather dismaying, that they chose to carry that on and not say, let's move on with this. Let's see if we can be neighbors again. They weren't interested in that at all. So I don't know if things have changed that much since then. I didn't see or hear much about communism. It was mainly the between the different 7 countries in the former Yugoslavia. They were never under Russian rule. They were under Tito, who was, and then Milosevic, the Serbian, which was their own brand of communism. It was communism, but it wasn't Russian.
Interesting. Oh, and what company did you use for the tour?
The tour I took was the Gate 1 tour. I thought they did a really nice job. They started in Dubrovnik, and I had been there earlier, as I said, and went to Kotor, which was worthwhile doing an extra day in Dubrovnik. So it went all along the coast, Makarska, Split. We did those tours. We went up into Slovenia. We did the Ljubljana and the caves and Lake Bled, and then to Zagreb. And that was about 8-9 days, something like that. Then I had another week in Zagreb with our hosts. And we went to the Plivice Lakes also with Gate 1. Some of the tours don't go to Plivice Lakes, and I think that's a big mistake. When you see those next week, I hope I'll come back next week and see them. They are just unbelievable. It was just a magical place. I would not go on a tour that didn't include them. And they're a UNESCO site for a reason.
Okay. So here's one more question about their language. If Italian is an easy language and Turkish is a difficult language, was Croatian an easy language to learn?
I did not speak a word of Croatian, and I didn't know any Croatian at all. As I say, everyone spoke English. My host in Zagreb was a professor of Italian. So she spoke several languages. She speaks excellent English. And her buddy, both of them, as I saw in the United States, she was a retired Supreme Court judge. But both of them spoke perfect English, as did their children. So, you know, they're grown children, adult children.
Okay. Does anyone else have a question for Mary? If not, we'll move on to the recipe segment.
Just,
I was just going to make a
just
comment.
one question. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I was going to just make a comment that we had adopted a couple of children from Russia. And so for a few years we had au pairs, and we had an au pair from Croatia, and her name was Sylvia Kuna. So her last name was the name of the currency, which now she's a travel agent from Luxembourg. Anyway, I just want to make that comment.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Sandra?
In terms of visas or easily passing from one country to the other, was it a problem or?
We didn't need any visas at all. Yes, it was very easy to go from one country to another, no problem.
Okay. All right. Well, Mary, thank you. As always, it was just amazing. And so you'll want to be sure and come back next Sunday for part 2 of this. So